And today we have a very important talk on the role of molecular biomarkers in lung cancer. We are lucky to have with us Dr. Lalit Sharma, Consultant, Department of Medical Oncology, Manipal Hospital, Jaipur. Dr. Rajiv Tangri, Technical Director, Histopathology and Cytopathology, National Reference Lab, Dr. Lal Path Labs. And Dr. Priyanka Agarwal, Senior Research Scientist, Molecular Diagnostics, National Reference Lab, Dr. Lal Path Labs. Without wasting any time, I'll hand over to Dr. Lalit Sharma, who will be taking us through the clinical aspects of lung cancer. Over to you, Dr. Lalit.
Thank you so much. At the outset, I would like to thank the organizers for providing all of us this opportunity. And this is a very important aspect of lung cancer. And to be more precise, the molecular markers are the future of oncology per se in all disorders, to be rather precise, not just lung cancer. Gone are the days when we used to treat disorders as disorders of an individual organ. Today is the era of personalization of therapy, and where we would like to know that why an individual actually developed a particular oncological disorder, what was the molecular pathology which actually led to that particular disorder, and that needs to be addressed. So why specifically we took on lung cancer today is that this is considered to be one of the deadliest oncological disorders even in today's time, and more than a quarter of demises from oncological disorders are attributed to lung carcinoma. And till recently, about a decade ago, lung cancer used to be considered to be either a single disease or was histopathologically only determined into either a small cell or a non-small cell carcinoma. And platinum agents used to be the only available treatment with us for these dreaded disorders. Gradually, as the histopathological diagnosis further kind of got refined, we were able to divide the non-small cell carcinoma into adenosquamous and large cell carcinomas. But along with the time, and especially in the last one decade, what we have come to know is non-small cell carcinoma is not just one disease. It is basically a basket of disease. There are several driving mutations. All these disorders have their own separate clinical course, and which can further be modified by targeted therapies which are available in today's date. And around 35% of advanced non-small cell carcinomas do have a driver mutation, which is actually targetable by a FDA approved agent. And there are multiple of these mutations, which we are going to touch upon in the subsequent slides. And we are going to see that there are multiple agents which are available to target these particular mutations, and the list is thankfully growing. Now, why detect these mutations? Why target these mutations with individual pharmacotherapeutic agents? The reason is, if we treat based on the same diagnosis, or if we treat as per the individual pathological disorder, or the treatment is most likely to benefit and least likely to experience toxicity. There are multiple advantages with these targeted therapies. First and foremost is that the tumor response is very rapid. So this becomes very important with patients who are actually very symptomatic at the point of presentation. Then, moreover, the responses are very deep, they are long standing, and the not only just progression-free survivals, we have been able to achieve advantages of overall survivals also in such a deadly disorder. Then many of these targeted therapies are oral therapies. So the quality of life improves pretty much because one, the toxicity is very less. To this these agents being oral therapies, the hospital visits are reduced pretty much. So the patient does not have to visit every now and then for IV infusions of the cytotoxic therapies. And as the toxicity profile is also far better compared to the cytotoxic therapies, these patients, the quality of life of these patients gets improved pretty much. Whereas on the other hand, if the same patient is subjected to either immunotherapy or cytotoxic therapy, these patients are less likely to respond to these therapeutic agents, and they are most likely to experience greater toxicity to these agents. Now, if we see as an example, in patients who have ALK positive lung cancer, there is a stark difference. The graphs are pretty well separated right from the very beginning. So there is a stark difference in the responses to targeted therapy versus the platinum-based chemotherapies. So that is why the current guidelines, be it NCCN, be it ESMO, they are all recommending uh, specific agents for specific mutations, be it EGFR mutation, which has now TKIs to the lineup, the third generation TKIs, whether it is ALK positive, ROS1 or BRAF mutated lung cancers. And the even better part is this is a non-exhausting list. More and more agents are being added. In October, if we see the guidelines in the every kind of quarter or every other quarter, we are able to see further more expansion in the list of targetable mutations. Furthermore, drugs are being introduced, and we are able to personalize the therapy in more number of patients depending on the molecular pathology which is actually guiding these or oncological disorders, which are actually the driver mutations in these oncological disorders. And there are many emerging biomarkers also. In the coming days, if God be with us and if the trials are successful, there would be further mutations such as KRAS or HER2 mutations, wherein we will be able to provide these patients with additional targeted therapies. Biomarkers have also kind of played an important role in predicting the response to immunotherapies also, though it has not been as robust as or as clear as in the EGFR, ALK, or any other mutation and targeted therapies, but at least to some extent we have been able to kind of predict the responses with the help of PDL1 while using immunotherapy. For example, at this point in time, for PDL1 low patients or negative patients, combination of the immunotherapy along with chemotherapy is less likely to give us that good a response as compared to those who have higher expression of PDL1, though this is not generalized and this might not be the case in uh, every there is a lot to understand about PDL1, or in fact, we are actually looking for even a better biomarker in coming future if would be available, which would be more predictable of the responses. So to conclude, there are highly effective targeted therapies, and moreover, there are lack of efficacy with the immunotherapy or cytotoxic therapy with individuals who harbor mutations in the specific genes such as EGFR, ALK, ROS, and that is why it becomes mandatory for all patients with non-squamous, non-small cell lung carcinoma to undergo a wider molecular analysis right from the very beginning. Newer approvals are being added as we talk, and broad testing for both established and emerging biomarkers is highly recommended. And almost around 35% will not only have these mutations, but these would be considered to be targetable by an FDA approved agents. PD-L1 is still important in initial decision making, but can't be tempted to act before your data set is complete, and it's not relevant in tumors with X-enable mutations. So with this background, we have very learned molecular scientists with us who will be delivering their talks subsequently, and we will be in a better situation to understand these disorders and over to the organizers for the subsequent talks. Thank you. Thank you so much for patiently hearing.
Thank you, Dr. Lalit Sharma. And I can't see any questions as of now. So let's move on to the next session by Dr. Priyanka. And then we'll see later on if we have any questions for Dr. Sharma. Dr. Priyanka Agarwal, she's a senior research scientist with Dr. Lal Path Labs, National Reference Lab. She'll be talking about the gene correlation in the 12-gene lung cancer panel that we have at our lab. Over to you, Dr. Priyanka.
Yeah, sure. I'm just sharing my screen. Just a minute.
Yeah.
Is it visible?
Yeah, it's visible, Dr. Priyanka, yes.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Myself is Dr. Priyanka. I'm working as a senior research scientist in Dr. Lal Path Lab in molecular department. So today I will highlight the update on the lung cancer and the role of molecular biomarkers. So as most of us know that among the lung cancers, non-small cell lung cancer constitutes around 80 to 85% of the cases. And it has different subtypes, adenocarcinoma, squamous, and the large cell carcinoma, and other which are not specified. So from this slide, I basically want to highlight that it is not the case if the same tumor is present between different patients. So just depending upon the type of the tumor, we can provide the same therapy to all the patients. Rather, it is not the case. It all depends upon the different molecular alterations which are present in the sample. Depending on that, only the therapy can be provided to the patient. And even within the same tumor also, we see the heterogeneous cell populations. So within the same patients also, different therapy can also be provided. So like here we can see in the adenocarcinomas and the squamous cell carcinomas, wide range of the molecular alterations can be seen in both the cases. So depending upon this, the therapy is provided to the patients, and these therapies are very specific to the targets. Like here we can see that for the EGFR, ALK, ROS, BRAF, etc., specific therapy has been recommended by the guidelines. So in this slide, I basically want to highlight one important thing is that, like we can see in 31% of the cases, driver mutations are unknown. So it's a very important aspect that there is a high possibility for all of us to explore more and more genes to provide the targeted therapy to the patients. So by doing the collaborative work, collaborative investigations of the researchers, molecular pathologists, clinicians, oncologists, and the laboratory scientists, this unexplored field should be explored more. So definitely by providing the targeted therapy, as we can see here, the overall survival definitely increases for the patients. So it even increases the quality of the life as well. Like here we can see, by providing the targeted therapy, the overall survival rate has been increased. So basically the Lung Cancer Mutation Consortium has made one cohort of 733 patients, and they identified the molecular alterations in all those cases. And after this, they divided the cohort in different groups. To one group, they provided the targeted therapy depending upon the presence of the molecular alterations. To another group, the therapy was not at all provided. And there was one more group in which the driver mutations could not be found. So the therapy was not provided. So it was seen that the overall survival probability was very high in the group who received the targeted therapy. So definitely we can say that knowledge of the molecular markers for providing the targeted therapy is very much essential for the for better outcome for the patients. So here we can see that the LCMC demonstrates that the best outcomes are seen in patients with identified drivers placed on targeted therapy, which is around 3.5-year median survival. So as per the guidelines of the CAP, AMP and IASLC, single gene testing has been strongly recommended as per the guidelines. But besides this, there is an expert consensus opinion who also said that besides this, the multiplex genetic sequencing based panels should also be recommended, which can cover either the expanded panel or the comprehensive panel in order to provide more knowledge of the molecular biomarkers so that the therapy can be provided. And one very interesting thing is it is as per the guidelines, but as I said earlier also that around 31% of the cases, the driver mutations could not be found. So we should keep on putting the effort in order to explore more and more genes so that in future also we can provide more therapy to the patients. And at regular intervals, we can see a large number of the publications, which also shows the importance of finding these rare driver mutations. But in order to perform all these things, tissue sampling is definitely a very important part, but this part will be covered by Dr. Rajiv. So I'm skipping this one. So now the question arises that how has the mutation testing in lung cancer evolved? Definitely it's not the case of the one day. So like here we can see in the 2000, as per the guidelines of the 2018, we can see in the adenocarcinoma as well as in the squamous cell carcinoma, only the 4 actionable drivers were recommended in 2018. But as with the ongoing research and with the cumulative researches, in 2020, this number increased to 6 drivers, in which the MAT and the ET was also included. But it's a very long journey. Like here we can see the approved TKIs in the 2001, from 2001 to 2020. So it's a very long journey in order to find out the therapy. So very interesting thing is that in 2021 only, EGFR therapy has been recommended for the EGFR exon 20 insertion mutation positive, as well as for the KRAS. So like we can say that for the KRAS, definitely it's very good. Like nowadays, whenever we are also analyzing the data and we are reporting, so whenever we also report G12C, it gives really a relief to us that at least the patient will be able to get the therapy now, which were not possible before 2021. So with the cumulative research, obviously, it will provide more help to the patients in order to provide the better therapy, specific therapy to all. So going further, as the guidelines keeps on updating and provide us the different revisions, in the same way, we at LPL also try to keep on expanded our panel and to include more and more genes so that we can provide better information to the clinicians as well as to the patients. So like currently we have different panels in order to for the lung cancer. One is a cancer targeted gene panel lung, in which we cover the 50 genes. Here we provide the report by FISH of ALK, ROS and the MAT amplification. Besides this, by using the NGS, we report the mutations present in the MAT, KRAS, BRAF, ERBB2 and the EGFR. But at the back end, we screen the 50 genes. So we even provide any of the genes if we detect in the note also. Like besides these recommended panels also, besides these recommended genes also, we even provide if we get any of the genes out of 50. Another panel is the 12 gene lung cancer panel. Here, the PDL1 report is provided by the IHC, and the hotspot genes and the fusion genes are provided by the NGS. Even we provide the MET CNVs. There is another assay, is the Oncomine Focus assay. Here we screen 52 genes which cover the hotspots, SNVs, indels, CNVs, and the gene fusions. So we always try to keep on updating ourselves so that we can provide better informations to all. Now I will highlight only few of the molecular markers. Like first comes the epidermal growth factor receptor. We all know that it's very good for the lung cancer, and it represents one of the most highly investigated gene in the non-small cell lung cancer. It's most commonly occur in non-smokers, and patients with the pure squamous cell carcinoma are unlikely to have sensitizing mutations, which is not the case with the adenocarcinoma. TKIs definitely show the clinical benefit, but the likelihood of response is relative to the mutation site as well. One very important thing is that the EGFR shows high expression in the tumor cells as compared to the healthy tissue. So the targeted therapy basically targets to the cells which has the mutation, which has mutated genes, not the healthy cells. So in this way, we can say that EGFR inhibitors have less toxicity. So currently, whatever the therapy is available with us for the EGFR, they cover the hotspot mutations which are present in the exon 18, 19, 20, and 21. So we have certain mutations which are EGFR sensitive and the EGFR resistant. Like here we can say that the 790 is generally the secondary kind of the mutations for which the osimertinib can be provided. And these are some of the rare mutations which are sensitive to the TKI, like 719, 861, etc. So coming to another molecular marker, which is the ALK, it's an anaplastic lymphoma kinase. It encodes a receptor tyrosine kinase, which belongs to the insulin receptor superfamily. Basically, ALK amplifications, fusions, and mutations have been shown to be the driving event for the non-small cell lung cancer. This ALK basically has different kinds of the fusion partners, but the most common is the EML4, and its frequency is around 5%. The first line therapy is available for the ALK, which is the alectinib, and other recommended options are the brigatinib, ceritinib, as well as the crizotinib. ROS1 is another tyrosine kinase which is frequently involved in genetic rearrangement in a variety of the human cancers. It also has different partners, but the most common found are the CD74, SLC34A2, CCDC6, FAK, which harbors the constitutive active ROS1 kinase domain, and it drives the cellular proliferation. In non-small cell lung cancer, it constitutes around 1% cases. And crizotinib is a very well-known therapy for the ROS1 mutation. Now coming to the BRAF, it is a serine threonine kinases. It play a role in regulating the MAP kinase signaling pathway. BRAF V600E has been well identified in NSCLC, for which the combined therapy of the dabrafenib and the trametinib can be provided to the patients. KRAS is basically it's a G protein. It has intrinsic GTPase activity, and most commonly the mutations are found in the exon 12, but many of the mutations are also found in the exon 13 as well as in the exon 61. And KRAS, it's present the most commonly mutated genes in NSCLC adenocarcinoma. Presence definitely of KRAS is prognostic of poor survival when compared to the patients without the KRAS mutations. But definitely with the development of the further therapy for the G12C, still we can just hope that more therapy would come for the KRAS rest of the mutations. MET, we can say that MET basically it regulates a multitude of the cell processes. And aberrant MET signaling has been identified in multiple human malignancies. MET overexpression is commonly seen in the NSLC. Basically, what happens is this the MET exon 14 skipping is a well-known mechanism, and while screening a few samples from the 12-gene lung cancer panel, we found that in few of the cases there was a mutation was present at the splice site, and when we checked the exon skipping, so this also gave the positive exon skipping also. So it's these kind of cases are very interesting, and now like two, three cases we could find out the splice site along with the fusion skipping. So it occurs, this MET exon 14 skipping, it occurs with an approximately 5% frequency in NSCLC. And now we know that the capmatinib has been already recommended by the guidelines. Now coming to another tyrosine kinase receptor, which is a RET, it affects the cell proliferation and the differentiation. Rearrangements may occur in NSLC between the RET gene, and generally the partner is the KIF5B and CCD6. RET arrangements occur in around 1 to 2% of the patients only, and therapy is also available for the RET molecular marker. NTRK is definitely has been well recommended by the NCCN guidelines. It encodes the tropomyosin receptor kinase fusion proteins. These alterations are found at high frequencies in rare cancer types. Point mutations are generally non-activating in these cases, and the first generation tyrosine kinase inhibitors are available for this. And it has been also said by the guidelines that if we don't find any of the, if this, basically this gene has not been covered in the broad panel, then every gene is coming out to be negative, then the patient should definitely go for the NTRK testing. ERBB2 is a well-known marker in the case of the breast cancer. However, in NSCLC also the frequency of mutation, these ERBB2 amplifications can be found, and the mutations generally which we found here is the exon 20 in frame insertions. MAP2K1 is a very rare mutations, and even like till now we screened around 650 samples of the 12 gene, and we could find out, I think, only in the single case, the MAP2K1. So definitely it's a very rare mutations, and mutations are predominantly transversions only, and they have shown a strong association with the smoking as well. So it's just a brief overview of the samples which we screened for the 12 gene lung cancer panel. So here the EGFR constituted the major portion, like 31%. Definitely 4% was released as an unfit. Either the data was not interpretable or the tumor percent was not there. So we released those samples as the unfit. In 29% of the cases, we could not find any of the driver mutations. So it's really a very interesting. In future also, we will try to explore more genes if we could find out. Rest, the EGFR was followed by the KRAS, which I have already told that it's one of the most common gene which you can find in the NSCLC. So now, okay, it's till now it's very much clear that okay, the molecular markers should be well investigated, but there are so many methods available. So the proper knowledge is definitely must. Like we can definitely find out these molecular alterations by either by the Sanger sequencing, pyro sequencing, next generation sequencing, quantitative PCR, ARMS PCR, as well as by the digital PCR. So all these are available at the LPL, and all these tests basically differ as per their sensitivity. So depending upon what the patients or the clinician wants, they can order these tests. And all these techniques definitely have certain limitations as well as advantages as well. Like in the NGS, the main query which always comes that the longer TAT. So, but here we can see that in the NGS, the multiple mutations can be covered in multiple genes. So in that way we'll assess. So it becomes cheaper, and it is also the time effective as well. and many mutations can be covered in the panel, and sensitivity is also very good for in the NGS. So definitely we should promote this so that the many mutations and many molecular markers we can provide to the patients. So now finally I'm summarizing. So in order to carry out all these things, definitely the first thing which we should keep in mind is the optimal tissue sampling and management is definitely a key to identify prognostically important genetic subtypes in the lung cancer. Individual gene testing is still going on, but we need to graduate ourselves in for testing in view of the limited tissue sample. Liquid biopsy is highly sensitive and need no biopsy, but it's a per gene test, only the single mutations can be covered. NGS can identify all the driving mutations, and definitely it's a tissue proficient. And with the development of the with the development of the RNA-based sequencing, many of the limitations which were earlier present with the NGS DNA sequencing, this sequencing has basically overcome all those. So I think we should move more towards the NGS so that we can provide many molecular biomarkers to the patients as well as to the clinicians. So that's all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Priyanka, for a very insightful session. And I can see 2 questions in the chat box. I'll just read them for you.
Yeah, sure.
The first one is from Mr. Abhishek Roy, who says, ma'am, that was indeed an insightful slide. Unknown driver accounts for 31%. So do you suggest to go for whole exome based panel for better resolution than just analyzing small panels?
Actually, for the exome, basically we are doing the somatic gene testing. So exome will only provide exome we generally perform in the blood sample. So exome, I don't think it will work. Only the germline mutations definitely can be found by the exome sequencing. And I think it should not be the case that we should always run behind the big panels. We should first of all understand that the therapy is available for what kind of the targets. Then only I think one should order the tests.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Priyanka. The second question is again from Mr. Abhishek Roy, who says, how precision oncology gives insights on non-small cell lung cancer transformed to small cell lung cancer. How precision oncology helps in this matter?
Basically, it's a histology point. So as far as I can only comment about the molecular targets. So as I have shown in the first slide also, there are specific molecular biomarkers which are present in the non-small cell lung cancer. And there are different markers present in the squamous cell carcinoma, like for the example of the EGFR only. EGFR sensitizing mutations are generally present in the adenocarcinoma. But in the case of the squamous cell carcinoma, from exon 2 to 7 deletions can be found in the squamous. So there are slightly different kind of the patterns based on which we can definitely try to judge that what kind of the tumor is this.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Priyanka. Any further questions? Team, do you have any other questions, or we can move to Dr. Tangri? I think that's it. Thank you, Dr. Priyanka.
Thank you so much.
I now call upon Dr. Rajiv Tangri to discuss on tissue handling. As Dr. Priyanka said, tissue sampling is the key to maximize the chance of detecting the underlying molecular aberrations. So over to Dr. Rajiv Tangri now. He'll discuss about the tissue handling.
Yeah. Thank you, Archana, and good evening, everyone. Mine will be a very brief talk, but yes, it is very important because all these molecular testing is based on the tissue samples, and usually what we get is paraffin blocks most of the times. So what should be the quality and quantity of tissue and tumor in the sections? I'll briefly touch upon that. I'll share my screen. I have a very short presentation, so just a second. Is my screen visible?
Yes, sir, it's visible. Yes, we can see it. Can you make it to slide mode?
Yes, I'm doing it.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Okay, so just all right, so I'll straight on move to the tissue requirements. So most important is, as we all know, is presence of adequate representative material in the tissue material that we get at the laboratory. By adequate representative material, I mean adequate tumor component should be there in the block that we receive. There should be minimum of necrosis and minimum of mucin. Now, there are no set guidelines or agreed upon guidelines on what should be considered as an adequate quantity or percentage of tumor in the tissue that should be considered as an adequate quantity. There are various studies, some say 30% of the sample, some say 40%, some say more than 60% gives a very good yield of DNA. But then the opinions are usually divided. I have a table of recommendations from a recent article which gives us some guidance on how the biopsy selection should be done and what kind of tissue requirement is there for molecular testing. So important is that whatever tissue we receive should be properly fixed. It should be adequately fixed, neither too over fixed nor under fixed. Should be put into formalin immediately after being removed from the body. And adequate fixation is the key. So it should be more than 6 hours, but less than 48 hours of fixation. That is the requirement. Complete clinical history, including site of biopsy, and if we are getting the blocks, then histopathology report of that block should accompany all the cases. And whenever there are multiple blocks of a case, it is advisable that all the blocks should be sent to us. We will not use all the blocks, but we'll select the best block wherein the best tissue is present with minimum of necrosis, and we'll use that and return everything else. I mean, that block also will return after utilizing the tissue that we require. So if we go through this table of recommendations for pre-analytical preparation for molecular analysis for lung cancer patients. So selection of biopsy site is important. So primary tumor versus metastasis, they say that it's equally suitable. You can take from either of the sites. Necrotic mass or bony metastasis is usually not suitable. Necrosis because of the obvious reasons. Bony metastasis because these tissue would have undergone harsh treatments for decalcification. So not recommended for molecular studies because DNA may be denatured. Multiple synchronous primary tumor, then each may be tested. Multiple site biopsies in one tumor, then one site is sufficient. But as I mentioned earlier, it is better to send all the blocks. We'll select the best one out of that. If there are sequential biopsies done at different points of time for a given tumor, it's optional to test on all, but then if it is post-treatment, post-chemotherapy, it is advisable to test on the subsequent blocks also, the latest tissue also, even if the testing has already been done on the pre-treatment tissue. on the sampling point, from sampling point of view, biopsy is always preferred over cytology because cytology by its nature is diluted with body fluids or blood. So, and the cellularity of tumor will be definitely less in cytology compared to biopsy. However, cytology is not a no-no. Cell block preparation is acceptable for molecular testing, provided that it is positive and there is adequate cellularity. We always say in pathology that obtain as much tumor tissue as clinically feasible, but we do understand that in cases of lung, it is not possible to take larger biopsies. So whatever is clinically possible, maximum tissue is acceptable. As I already said, cell block, if cytology is available, cell block is preferred over fluid. And blood and plasma, further evaluation is required on testing on blood or plasma. Fixation, as I said, fixation should be done, and it should be adequate fixation, neither over fixation nor under fixation, because even over fixation would need to denaturation. Decalcification and heavy metal fixatives or non-EDTA decalcifying solutions, if they have been used on tissue processing, should be avoided. And fixation time, I already mentioned, should be less than more than 6 hours, but definitely less than 48 hours. From pathology point of view, it is advisable to limit the amount of immunohistochemistry for histological subtyping. So in lung, we do practice that at LPL, and if a carcinoma lung comes to us for immunohistochemistry, we limit our testing to only 2 markers, TTF1 and P40 in most of the cases. Unless and until both are negative, we may have to do 1 or 2 more markers, but then we don't go in like we go in for all the other tumor types, wherein we don't limit the number of markers, because we do understand that molecular testing is very, very important for further management. So tumor content, as I said earlier, there is no consensus on what should be the tumor content, but this article says that for Sanger sequencing, more than 40% of the tissue submitted should be tumor. But then it is important that what kind of biopsy it is. If it is a very, very tiny biopsy, and even if the tumor is more than 50% or 60%, then the number of cells will not be adequate enough to yield the DNA content that we require for the testing. So some articles do mention the number of cells also, the number of tumor cells also. Like some say more than 300 tumor cells should be there in the section. Others go even up to 100. So different articles quote between 100 to 400 tumor cells. So definitely more than 100 tumor cells should be there to yield a good DNA content. If we are using more sensitive techniques, of course, lesser number of tumor cells percentage is also acceptable. Tumor enrichment with the microdissection techniques is definitely preferred. So if microdissection facility is available, this can enrich the tumor content. Yeah, so before so this was all about tissue requirement for molecular testing. So I would like to highlight here the specific staining for PDL1, which is used in many of the lung cancers, and it is now becoming a treatment target in many of the lung cancer cases. So there are specific outlines available for PDL1 testing, and 3 clones of PDL1, as you are all aware, are available, and all 3 clones are available with us at LPL. PDL1 22C3 DECO, PDL1 SP263, and PDL1 SP142. The last 2 clones are from Ventana. So for 22C3 and SP263, a minimum of 100 tumor cells should be there to adequately report these cases. While for PDL1 SP142, the guideline is 50 tumor cells. So even if the number of tumor cells is less than 100 but more than 50, we do proceed with the staining. So we include these in our reports. So cell blocks, as I already mentioned, cell block is less preferred over a biopsy. However, if there is no other option available, we do go in for cell block studies. But then it must be remembered that cell block is a block prepared from fluid, pleural fluid or peritoneal fluid, and it contains tumor cells floating in the fluid. Along there may be a lot of inflammatory cells along with it. So when the block is prepared, we are not able to differentiate between tumor infiltrating immune cells or tumor infiltrating lymphocytes and bystander immune cells or bystander lymphocytes in the fluid. So it is not possible to report immune score, which is required in reporting of SP142 specifically, and also in reporting of SP263 in some cases. All we can report in cell block preparation is tumor cell score or TC, and we cannot report IC. This must be remembered. I think that's it from my side. I am happy to take up if there are any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Tangri. I can see 2 questions in the box. The first one I'll address to Dr. Priyanka. Mr. Nilesh Kulkarni wants to know each mutation and the drugs in the 12-gene panel. Dr. Priyanka?
Yes, the 12-gene. So what does he want?
He wants to know mutation-wise the drugs in the 12-gene panel, the drug against each mutation.
Okay. So I think in the current format, we don't provide that table to the patients. Otherwise, in the earlier report, we were providing all the therapy which is currently available and as per the current guidelines to the patient. So if he wants, we can provide that.
Yeah, so we can mail it to him. I think, Mr. Nilesh, we can mail it to you.
Yeah, sure.
Any particular reason for not providing it in the current report format, Dr. Priyanka?
Actually, it was only asked by the clinicians to change the report format because they don't want that. So we basically shortened our report and removed that table.
Right. So we can mail it to you, Mr. Kulkarni. The second question I'll address to Dr. Lalit Sharma. The question is again from Mr. Nilesh Kulkarni. Are same mutations detected in 2 different patients can be advised same therapy and get the same results?
Well, to the first part of the question, that 2 different patients kind of being detected with the same mutation, probably we would be obviously advising them the same medication. But if there are other options available, like in EGFR mutation, there are at least 3 generations of TKIs right now available. Depending on the clinical scenario, we would kind of provide the patients with all the pros and cons for individual molecules, and depending on the clinical scenario, we and the logistic aspect also, we might offer multiple options also. But probably what I believe he wants to know is if the same drug is being prescribed for the same mutation in 2 different patients, do they get the same result? I do not believe that. Most of us clinicians do have had our experiences with almost all pharmaceutical agents And the disease biology and in the individual patient responses are always unpredictable. It's just over the due clinical course, we come to know how the individual patient behaves. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lalit. There's another question. Dr. Priyanka, are you covering HER2 mutation in NSCLC?
Yes, we are covering HER2 mutations.
Okay, I hope that answers. Any further questions, team? I can't see any other questions. Team, do you have any more questions? I think that's
No,
it.
ma'am.
On behalf of the team, I would like to thank Dr. Lalit Sharma, Dr. Tangri, and Dr. Priyanka for a very insightful session today. Thank you so much.